It's nobody's favorite time of the week again. It's Ask a Rabbi Wednesday, although we're a little bit late this week. And we want to apologize for that, but some of my favorite YouTubers have also had some issues recently. The fact was, I know some folks saw a video that I made on Monday, and actually for some reason I had tremendous trouble uploading it until Tuesday. I don't know what happened, although it was a big file. This one I hope won't be quite so big, but you never know what comes out. This week's question, it comes from Facebook. It actually was not sent to me. It was in a group discussion that I was on, and it came up the following question: really, how do we define being Jewish? Meaning, is it a religion? Is it something, or is it like a race? How do we define it? Is it, being a member of a group by virtue of the lifestyle that you live and the beliefs that you have, like a religion? Is it something inherent, like a race or nationality, I guess? Although nationality could change, and so maybe it's a little bit more like nationality in that sense. What is it? And the answer is, of course, religion can change. It's very easy to change. So, this was actually, I'm not going to mention the names because it wasn't directed to me, so I'm not going to mention the names. But, so I left an answer there on the Facebook as a comment there to that question. And my answer was as follows. As I can find, and this is just my own opinion, not everyone will agree with me on this, but this is how I see it. Halacha sees three different categories. Although there are many subcategories within these categories, there are three basic categories that I can see vis-a-vis this particular question. One is someone who's obviously not Jewish. No question, nobody questions whether he's Jewish or not, although we're talking from a halachic standpoint. They might identify as Jewish, and there are many people that halacha does not recognize as Jewish who identify as Jewish erroneously as far as halacha recognizes it. So we're not discussing politics right now. We're discussing law, and now maybe we should be respectful to those people and not tell them that they're not Jewish for whatever various reasons or so forth. It's a different story. Maybe yes, maybe no. That's not what we're talking about right now. Some people might say you should. Some people might say you shouldn't. Some people might say it's a case-by-case thing, depending on people's feelings and so forth. That's not what we're discussing right now. But I'm saying, in a halachic sense, they're clearly not Jewish. Now, such a person, in order to understand what these other two groups, I want to reflect on the halachas, on the Jewish laws of conversion, of how one who is clearly not Jewish becomes a Jew. And we're not discussing right now the process, how one becomes a Jew, but what happens, what is the permanence of that conversion? Meaning, let's say a person, his whole life he was Christian, then he converts to Judaism, and then he goes back to Christianity. Does he cease being a Jew? Yes or no? And the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rambam, the Gemara, they're all very, very clear. And they say the following: that the person who is what they say is Choser L'Suro, he returns to Sur, means something you turn away from, something that's negative, is a negative state, is folly, which actually would seem to indicate that we do support the idea of people converting to Judaism. If we view his return as negative, although some would suggest that that's only because he had already converted, whatever it is, so we'll leave that on the side. That if someone is Choser L'Suro, someone who converted according to Jewish law and then returns to his previous religion, does not revert to being a Gentile, but rather he is considered to be what the Shulchan Aruch calls Yisrael Mumer. He is a Jewish apostate, for lack of a better term. same thing. Meaning someone who's born Jewish but does not follow Judaism, is an atheist, or is a Christian, or a Buddhist, or a Muslim, or whatever it is, as their religion, doesn't change their necessarily. They are considered what we call Yisrael Mumar. It's a Jewish apostate, meaning it's not like how the Jews for Jesus, they're so proud of their Jewish heritage. No, it's a stain on them that they're still Jewish and they're to be punished as a Jew, even though they're sinners and they've abandoned Judaism. They don't lose their Jewish identity and or their Jewish status. Maybe they lost their Jewish identity. They don't lose their Jewish status as far as punishment goes, but they do not receive the reward as a Jew because they're not believing in Judaism. They're not. So, although that's something that could be discussed, the issues of belief, but in general, we would say that, well, how do they follow Judaism? If they're following Judaism as Chazal understood it, at least in action, even if we wanted to make discussions about beliefs, it's not really, for the most part, we've accepted, like the Rambam says, beliefs are fundamental. There are certain fundamental beliefs that are almost dogmatic. They're not actually dogmatic, but they're pretty close. For all intents and purposes, they would be considered dogmatic. But as far as we can tell, it's how does the person live? Does he observe the Sabbath? Some people would say, well, does that change when the society changes? And very few Jews do observe the Sabbath. These are different issues, which are very complicated in halacha, and there are many, many different approaches among various poskim on these issues. But it's ideal, though, when it's appropriate to be strict, and when it's appropriate to be lenient. That's the best I can say. And I'm not a posek, but we do have words of various poskim that we can examine and discuss in many ways. But back to this. So basically, you'll have three basic groups. You will have, to simplify it, you'll have someone who's totally not Jewish according to halacha. You will have someone who is Jewish, but Judaism is not their religion, and so they call them the Yisrael Mumar. They call them the Jewish apostate. I would call them a non-Gentile. I wouldn't reward them with the title of a Jew necessarily, but they are non-Gentiles, and that's why it's only like in our. And then you have the Jew whose religion is Judaism and who does his or her best to keep it. And so, a Jewish man like that, count for a minyan, his wine would be kosher and so forth. Or a Jewish woman like that, the wine would be kosher, as opposed to the Israel Mumar, the Jewish apostate, does not count in the minyan. Their wine is not kosher. And so they lose part of their Jewish status. And so in some ways they're like a Jew, in some ways they're like a Gentile. And so we would call them a non-Gentile. They could make the bracha shelo asani goy. They could say the blessing, thank God not making me a Gentile, meaning not that there's anything wrong being a Gentile, but that we have these extra commandments that the Gentiles don't have, and so we're thanking God for the commandments. But obviously someone who doesn't believe in the commandments doesn't want the commandments. He probably wouldn't say such a blessing, but that's the whole purpose why we do not say a blessing in the positive sense for, Shasani Israel, that he made me a Jew, but rather we say in the negative tense, Shelo Asani Goy, because we can say we're not, or the Magen Avraham says, like as many others, we don't live up to what it means maybe to be a Jew. And so we can't be so arrogant to declare ourselves as Jews. All we can say is that we're non-Gentiles. And maybe we ourselves, even no matter how religious we are, maybe we fall short in some way. And so it's really an act of contrition and humility for us to say this blessing, that God did not make us a Gentile, meaning that we cannot be so arrogant to claim that we are Jews, but rather we're only merely non-Gentiles. Although halachically, probably not be so, but in the sense of Musar and so forth. But even, I guess, halachically, because that's why we say the blessing in this sense, in the negative as opposed to the positive. The Samarov in Parshas Vayikra brings a very interesting note to this as well, which is rather fascinating, that a Yisrael Mumar is actually much worse than a Gentile in every sense. That the Jewish apostate, first of all, there's nothing bad being a Gentile, necessarily, but you can follow the 7 laws and be a righteous Gentile. Even in other religions, some would say someone could have the title of righteous Gentile. Rashi says in Malachi 1:11. Even idolaters who don't follow the 7 laws of Noah, in God's eyes, might be termed as being righteous, maybe even greater than a Jewish high priest, if the Jewish high priest is corrupt and so forth. And so in God's eyes, there really isn't any favoritism to the Jews particularly, but we're talking in Jewish law that God gave us, Torah lo Shemayim. The Bible says the Torah is not in heaven, so we have only the Torah what God gave us here on earth, and it's not, the hidden things belong to the Lord our God. The revealed things are for us and for our children, for all generations. So the Samarov says in the first chapter of Leviticus, it says, Ki yakrib adam mikem, that when a person from you offers an offering to God, so we have the following. A Jew who's a faithful Jew can bring sacrifice to the temple. He's obligated to when the temple stands, if he's able to, and so forth, in all the different situations that we look forward, that we need with, as far as that's concerned. A Gentile of any religion who worship idols is allowed to bring an offering to God in the Jewish temple to the Jewish God. As a tribute to the Jewish God, he's allowed to send, however, he's only allowed to send a burnt offering. He cannot have a peace offering or any of the other offerings that are consumed by human beings. The only offering that a Gentile is allowed to bring is a burnt offering. And incidentally, Gentiles are allowed to bring on private altars offerings to God. And I know some Noahide righteous Gentiles who still to today will bring animal sacrifices, doves, and so forth as a burnt offering to God on an altar, a private altar that they might build in their backyard, like was practiced in ancient Israel before the temple was built permissively, and also after the temple existed illegally. But we're talking in the Jewish temple that the non-Jew of any religion, meaning he can worship idols, he could worship the Roman gods, the Greek gods, but maybe for political reasons or maybe for sincere reasons, but his theology is messed up, or for whatever reason, he was allowed to bring a sacrifice in the Jewish temple. Now, what about what we spoke about when we began our answer, the Choser L'Suro, the Gentile who converted to Judaism, he's now a Jew, and then he reverts to his previous religion, or any other religion, other than Judaism, for that matter. Such a person is Ki Yisrael Mumar. He is like a Jewish apostate. And a Jewish apostate, a Jew who worships idols, is not allowed to bring sacrifices in the Jewish temple. So, we see that, of course, he can repent and go back to being a Jew. But we see that in this sense here, this person, meaning even he was born a Gentile, he converted to Judaism, and then he converted back to his old religion, even though before he converted, he was allowed to bring, before he converted to Judaism, as a Gentile, he was allowed to bring sacrifices in the Jewish temple. Now he's Jewish, Jew. He never reverts back to being a Gentile. And so, as a Jewish apostate, he's on a much lower level than he began with, because he now is not allowed to bring, and could never bring, a sacrifice in the Jewish temple until he repents of this sin of idolatry. So we see from here those three, and of course it would be the same with a person born Jewish. So that's why I often will refer to Jews who do not believe in Judaism, do not put in any effort whatsoever to observe Judaism, as people not who are Jews, but who are people of Jewish ancestry. Now the question is that within the halachic framework, where do we draw the line? What are the issues which we do draw the line, which we don't draw the line? And in many ways, the standard Orthodox practice, the orthopraxy, is sometimes much more strict than the halacha requires, partially for political reasons, partially for reasons of protecting Torah, and in reality there are many reasons that the standard, many aspects of the standard conservative Judaism should be actually perfectly fine, except there are certain questions in their beliefs. Some do have those issues, some don't. But I would say, in certain aspects of conservative Judaism, that if they do believe in the 13 principles of faith, and certain practices that are really issues of minhag and not halacha, they would possibly not be considered Jewish apostates, as opposed to the Reform, which don't believe in the resurrection and things. They would much more likely be considered to be Jewish apostates, although there are certainly people within Reformed temples, that they attend, they're members of Reformed temples either out of ignorance or but they probably would not have issues with the 13 principles of faith if they were taught differently. Are they Tinuk Shenishba? What are the exact issues with this? Even a Tinuk Shenishba, however, a Nebuch and Apikoros is also an Apikoros, the Brisker Rav said. So his wine wouldn't be kosher. There are a lot of issues, so it's not so simple either way. To be on the safe side, it's always best to just follow the Orthodox way, but certainly in belief, that what does it hurt? I don't see what does it hurt any, how it's not difficult in any way to believe in the 13 principles of faith. You're not making any sacrifice really if you just will believe. I don't understand why someone, I know I know a lot of people, they question the Pascal argument, but what do you have to lose to believe? I understand what you might have to lose to observe. What do you have to lose to believe? Believe in the 13 principles. All right, but of course you're going to say, well, so then why this religion and not any other religion? And so we compare all the different religions. We can, study comparative religion. We come to a pretty clear thing that Judaism is the true religion. That only religion that was revealed in front of millions of people who all heard the voice of God all at once. If you read Deuteronomy 4, it basically is the greatest argument of why Judaism is the one true religion. Now, other people, they don't know, and they were brought up in other religions, and God understands that. That's what we read in Malachi 1:11. So that's, or they were fooled by, smooth operating missionaries or things or whatever it is, because it's not their fault, or they have big Yetzer Hara. I don't know. Everyone has their own reasons. So anyway, so those are basically. So we're not going to say who fits into those categories, who doesn't fit into those categories, but basically we have three basic groups. You have Jews, non-Gentiles, and Gentiles, and so Judaism is in a sense both, but certainly someone who is in that state of non-Gentile has no right to claim that they represent Judaism, and the Jewish people, whole peoplehood is based on Judaism, meaning these identifications, these forms of status are all based in Jewish law, in halacha. So if you don't believe in halacha, so what right, you don't believe in Judaism, you don't even believe in God, what right do you have to self-identify as a Jew? I don't even understand why would you even want to? I mean, me as a religious person, I would say, yeah, according to Jewish law, you're Jewish means that, because you don't keep the Sabbath, you're going to be punished by God for this, or whatever it is. I mean, that's just our belief, and if you don't accept that belief, so you don't accept the belief, and that's it. But and so why self-identify as a Jew? I don't understand. What do you have to gain from that? What so the only thing that is gained by these people is that they can boss us around and make us all look bad with all of their anti-Torah agendas that they now would have people believe that this is what represents Jews, and that's horrible. So I guess I made another long video, longer than I originally intended, but again, so those are how I can see in halacha the three forms of status of the Jew: the one who is Jewish, whether he's born Jewish or he converted; the one who is clearly not Jewish, even if he might identify as Jewish erroneously, and then the one who's in between those two, and then actually worse than either of those two is the Israeli, the Jewish apostate, who is whose religion is not Judaism, and so he's not really a Jew, but he is bound by the Jewish law, according to Jewish law, and so therefore loses his privileges as a Jew, and also would be punished for not keeping the mitzvos. There's a story by the Vilna Gaon that there was someone the Vilna Gaon saw this very big apostate Jew, and he said, "Oh, you didn't make a bracha on that." He drank something. He said, "What, Rabbi? Don't you know who I am? I don't keep anything. What do you expect?" He said, "Yeah, and you'll have to answer for that too, for each." All right, so someone who's totally ignorant, it's a different story, but someone who is aware and makes a conscious decision, but still the one who generally what's understood is that they might not receive a punishment on each and everything the same way, but they would still, they wouldn't count for a minion, wouldn't their wine wouldn't be kosher, for sure not, and things like that. Now the thing is, ultimately, they what about counting for a minyan? We could say sometimes that if a person walks into shul, maybe they did tshuva, and we can count them. All right, I have to go now. It's time for me to go into work. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you all next time. God bless.